Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone 13 Pro has been out for a month and a half or a couple months at this point, and I wanted to talk about what it's like to use after that amount of time, as it's a phone I find that I keep coming back to over and over. Typically I'll use a larger phone, but I really like the overall size and the lack of compromise this year as compared to last year. With the iPhone 12 Pro Max, it was compromised quite a bit in the sense that it had lesser cameras than the larger 12 Pro Max, but with the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max this year, there is no compromise. So really you're just going from a smaller size and smaller battery to a larger size with a larger battery and display. So if you're using a 13, most people will find that it's very comfortable. In fact, the overall size is really easy to hold with one hand, and it's something that if you want to use a phone one-handed and you don't have super small hands where you would need a 13 mini, this is really great. You can reach across the entire phone, or at least I can, without a problem. It's easier to use one-handed. Of course, there are a few things you're lacking when compared to the 13 Pro Max, such as battery, but overall it's been pretty good. Now, first let's talk about the overall durability. And the durability of the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max as well are quite good because they're stainless steel. So around the outside edge, it's stainless steel. There's no issues there whatsoever. And if you do have the silver model, they tend to scuff up a little bit, but this one has held up really well. I've used it on and off with no problems whatsoever. There's no issues with it. It's very durable and has glass on the back and ceramic shield on the front as well that's held up also. There's no scratches. I haven't used a screen protector with it, but no scratches whatsoever. It seems to hold up really well. The same is true for the camera glass. I keep getting asked by quite a few people, should I put a protector over the cameras? And typically I'll say no, because these are sapphire, and while they may not be the highest quality sapphire, they're higher quality than glass and harder to scratch than glass. So you could put a protector over there, but typically the issues I see with these is maybe someone dropped it and cracks one as opposed to actually scratches it. It's very rare to see a scratch on the camera lens of more recent iPhones due to that sapphire crystal. So that's a great thing. And like I said, I've had no issues there. Even with dropping a phone, I showed that in a recent video with the 13 Pro Max, the display held up really well. It didn't even crack, it just dented some of the metal as well. So not really too many concerns there. And of course, if you were concerned, you can just put a case on it or a screen protector. Now, the display is really great this year, and something that I really appreciate with the smoothness of ProMotion. The more I use it, the more I appreciate it, with how smooth it is when you're scrolling, and I notice it in different applications such as music. Maybe you're just scrolling through, browsing your different libraries. It seems to be very smooth, and it's hard to show on camera because it's running at 120 Hertz, and the camera's only running at 30 or 60 frames per second, so you're really not going to see it. But in slow motion, you can see it as you swipe from side to side. It's much smoother than a phone that doesn't have it, and you can notice this in real life use. Also with the display, the PWM rate is so high that it doesn't bother my eyes. So typically PWM flashes the display to control brightness, so as you bring the brightness up, it flashes it faster. As you bring it down, it flashes slower, and that can cause some people to feel nauseated or cause headaches. And thankfully, with this phone, it's higher than any other iPhone model and doesn't really cause a problem. Even with the 120 Hertz display that can ramp down to 10 Hertz, the PWM rate is at a rate that doesn't seem to bother me at all, and most people I talk to. There are a few people where it won't be that great, but in general it seems to be pretty good that way. Also, the notch being a little bit smaller this year, movies and video don't seem to intrude too much unless you expand them a lot. So if you go into something like YouTube and play one of my videos, you can see in the notch, it does protrude into the notch just a little bit. This is a little bit annoying with widescreen content. However, if you don't have widescreen content, you won't see that, but you can see the notch protrude into the display ever so slightly into what you're watching. Of course, you can just expand that like this or bring it down, but it is protruding into there where it isn't on the 13 Pro Max. So that's a little bit disappointing if you're using really wide content, but overall, it's not too much of an issue for most people. And I know most people just either expand it, or if you're using regular 16:9 footage, which is typical out of the camera, or what a lot of different people use online, it's not going to be a problem at all. Now, like I said, the one-handed use is really good. Now, at first when I started using this, I felt like I was going to drop it because I was used to a much larger phone. And because it's smaller, it was a little bit more difficult to hang on to from time to time. Of course, a case typically fixes that, and just the overall usability, holding it seems to be fine now once I got used to it. But I did have to relearn maybe going into the keyboard and looking for maybe an artist here. Maybe you're looking for someone else, and I did have to relearn the keyboard, but I found it easier to learn this than going to the larger phone and having the larger keyboard for some reason. It's definitely better for one-handed use. And the design overall, the weight is fairly substantial. The camera module is quite heavy, but I'm really glad this time around there's no compromise there. So with the cameras, you get all the same features as the 13 Pro Max, and you've got all the same video modes, HDR, as you can see here, different photo modes, portrait, and everything else that you would get with the larger phone. So you've got macro, of course, which is really nice. If you want to get really close to a subject and snap a photo, you can do that. And it's just nice to have all those features in the smaller phone, and it's not really an issue this year having that smaller phone. So I'm glad to see that. Also, the speed overall is great. With the public releases of iOS 15, with 15.1.1 that's on this, it's nice and smooth. Although some people do have some issues from time to time, it seems to be pretty good overall. Most of the time, it's nice and smooth. I haven't had too many app crashes or anything like that, but we will see better improvements or future improvements with upcoming versions of iOS, whether that be iOS 15 or probably 5 or 6 years into the future to iOS 20 or something along those lines when we have those on this device, since Apple supports them for many, many years. Now, the speakers have been holding up well also, and the reason I mention this, some people have asked me in the past, is because the 11 Pro Max that I have actually sounds as though the speakers are blown. They haven't been very durable over time, and while it's a couple of years old, and I did use it full time for quite some time, the speakers didn't seem to really hold up very well. They started to distort at higher volumes. I haven't had that issue with the 13 Pro or the 13 Pro Max, so they've constructed them a little bit better, and with the speaker being in the upper part of the notch now, I think it has a better stereo sound overall, and whatever they've done here makes it sound a little bit better than what we had last year even. So the speakers have sounded really good before. Now they sound great, and they're a little bit louder and have a better stereo sound if you're watching video. So I think they've done a great job, and it's an improvement over what we've had before. Now, when it comes to the overall battery life, that's probably what I get asked the most, is how is it going from maybe a 13 Pro Max to a 13 Pro? And typically, I can get through a day with this no problem. By the end of the day, I'll have about 40%, maybe 30% left with normal use. That's taking it off of the charger in the morning and putting it on the charger pretty early in the morning the next day, usually around 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, something like that. And so this phone I just recently switched back to, and it seems to be okay. You'll see 100% battery capacity, and just using it this morning, I'm down to 99%. Of course, I've only used it for a little bit, as you can see here, so this isn't a great overall feel of what the battery is like, but it's 1 hour and 17 minutes of screen on time, 6 hours and 58 minutes of screen off time playing music last night. So this is not the current battery life, but in general, it's getting me through the day without a problem. The iPhone 13 Pro Max can get me through 2 days just about. So you definitely get better battery life with the larger one, but again, there's that compromise of weight and size and everything else that you have to manage. Also, if the battery does go down quickly, of course, you could just use a charger and bump that right back up without a problem. And typically I'll just put it on a fast charger and bring it right back up, or I'll wireless charge it at night, put it on the charger at night, and it's not a problem. So I really haven't had any issues with that. As far as reception, well, Apple just released a patch, iOS 15.1.1, to fix issues with call drops with this. Now, I've noticed that my 5G and 4G and all of that seem to be just fine on this device. So if we go to maybe apple.com, let me turn off Wi-Fi here. You'll see at Apple, if we scroll through, maybe we'll just select the iPhone here. We'll go to Learn More, and it loads nice and fast. If I want to switch back to Wi-Fi, it seems to work okay as well. So we'll just scroll down, tap on buy, and it seems to be working okay. So not really any issues as far as that goes. So with the beta versions, if you are running those, I would expect maybe some problems there, but in general, it seems to be holding up very well as far as the public releases go. Some people have had concerns of overall battery life, and it seems to be fixed with 15.1.1 or future versions, but overall the battery life seems to be pretty good for me. Now, this is going to vary from person to person, of course, but I think my favorite thing about this phone is probably the cameras, where they can record 4K 60 HDR. I've recorded many of my videos with them, and like I said, without the compromises, not just the photos, but the videos and all the different modes you have with 4K 60. It's just something that I think is probably the best phone for most people, with it being easily reachable across the display, a good size for many people. Now, the phone is a little bit small for me, but that's because I have hands that are mostly larger than most people, but I can easily reach across the phone, and I can do that on a 13 Pro Max. So for me, this is okay. I'll go back and forth between this and the Pro Max size, but the battery gets me through the day. It's held up well, it's durable, and it's something I recommend to most people. Typically, I will recommend this phone unless they're looking for battery specifically or need a larger display. Maybe they have problems seeing the display, need some larger text or larger icons. Then I would recommend the Pro Max. Otherwise, I typically recommend the Pro or maybe the Mini for some people if they want a really small phone that's more similar to the iPhone 5 series phones. If they were fond of those and wanted something of that size, then I recommend that. Otherwise, if battery is what matters most to you, well, then I'd go with the Max. But for most people, this is what I recommend, and I think it's one of the best phones out there, if not the best phone out there. Now, if you have a 13 Pro, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Are you planning to upgrade to one? Did you pick one up? Are you waiting for one? I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts about it in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.